Seahawks fans were hoping that the team would add some veteran presence at guard during free agency. That didn't happen, but part of the strategy is because this is a young group that the franchise believes still has a lot of upside. We're going to be taking a deep dive into whether or not this group can take that big jump, and of course, talking some guards that could help reinforce this group in the draft coming up next year on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, here on our Wednesday episode by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s, whether you're listening in from Corpus Christi, Texas, or Lexington, Kentucky. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in and making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Today, it's all about the big boys at the guard position. We're going to look at the current state of the Seahawks roster in the interior. And of course, as we continue our draft preview, a deep dive into one of the deepest position groups in this draft, the guard spot. It's a jam-packed episode brought your way courtesy of our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Now for your lead story here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Unless you've been hiding under a rock or didn't watch any Seahawks games last year, you should know that the guard position has been a major area of concern. And honestly, it's been before 2024, but last season certainly was a big part of the reason the offense did not perform up to expectations. With a bunch of young players rotating in and out of the lineup, there were a few injuries, and just the performance was not there. So fans were hoping that there was going to be a veteran signing. Seattle did try to get Will Fries, who ended up going to the Vikings. And since then, they've been bringing in everybody that's left on the free agent market, but they've all left without a contract. As John Schneider said a couple days ago, the fit just hasn't been there to this point. And so, Rob, here we are now, beginning of April. The Seahawks have 4 guards on their roster total. Now, Jalen Sundell could play guard in a pinch. He did it in college. The guy could play every position on the offensive line. But as far as actual guards on the roster, Seattle has got 4 of them with an average age of under 24 and a half years old. So this is still a very young group. Christian Haynes, Sataoa Laumea. You've got Anthony Bradford entering year 3, and he's only 23. He's the youngest of the group. Those 3 are the returning players. And then coming over from Baltimore, I don't know if I even want to try to pronounce this name, but Sataoa Laumea is coming in from Baltimore. He was signed recently. That's the 4th guard. That's who's on the depth chart right now.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest reasons why Seahawks fans are so concerned is because you have a great deal of youth, a great deal of unproven commodities. And, as you said, anybody who watched the Seahawks a year ago knows that the interior play was atrocious. Now, I do think that, again, something that we've talked about a lot here recently is the fact that Seattle feels, I think, more comfortable than a lot of fans out there, a lot of the media pundits across the country might feel about this group, just because of the fact that they do have the coaching experience coming in that they lacked a year ago. And I don't mean to be disrespectful to Ryan Grubb or to Scott Huff. I think both of them are terrific young coaches, but the key word there is young and inexperienced. It just obviously was their first year in the NFL for both of them. There's 68 combined years of experience when you look at Clint Kubiak, and then the rest of the offensive line coaches, Rick Dennison. It really is it's a completely different group now that the Seattle has in the coaching staff. And that is the belief that they are going to be able to coax the talent from these young players and really be a much more successful unit. That said, I do fully expect Seattle to invest one of their top picks in an offensive guard to be able to kind of round out this group.
I think when you look at the players that the Seahawks have right now, I feel like 3 of the 4 players on the depth chart are scheme fits right now. Sataoa Laumea is actually pretty athletic. And if you watch the games when he started late last year, we got to see him get to the second level a number of times and make blocks. and he was really good on the pulling plays. So I'm confident that Laumea can play in this wide zone scheme. Christian Haynes absolutely can play in this scheme. If you watched UConn when he started there for 3 years, he excelled in the zone game, and he can win on reach blocks. He's got mobility. He tested really well. I think this is actually a better fit for him than any of these other players that are coming back. The one that I'm wondering about is Anthony Bradford, because Anthony Bradford's 330-plus pounds. Now, he tested fairly well at the combine a couple years ago, and if you turn on the tape at LSU, there were glimpses where he had enough athleticism to be able to zone block, but that was a college level. I'm wondering, especially the wide zone variety, is Anthony Bradford going to be able to fit in this scheme? And so not only am I looking at this team right now with the fact they only have 4 players, I think one of those youngsters that they drafted a couple years ago, I'm wondering if the puzzle pieces are not going to fit the way they need to for him to mesh with this scheme, which that leaves you with 3 guards on your roster. I think that there's certainly question marks from a depth perspective there. Bradford is certainly a player that I'm going to be watching closely because we know he struggled. He had a rough season last year, 10 penalties in 10 starts, gave up a bunch of sacks. Can a different coaching staff coax more out of him, though, and is he going to be able to fit in this scheme? To me, Christian Haynes is the one that has the best chance to be the beneficiary here because we still believe in the talent. And honestly, you look at the games he played last year, Rob, he wasn't great by any means, but you kept wondering why you didn't see more of him because most of the games he played in, he played fairly well. So I want to see what he looks like with this coaching staff working with him. To me, he's the biggest beneficiary. And then I'd have Laumea second on this list.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think that those 2 guards are the best fit in the wide zone scheme. I think that their athletic testing proves that. I think if you go back to their college tape, that was the system in which both of them were most successful in. And I would also agree with you when it comes to Bradford, as well as Alameve Laula, who played his college ball at Oregon. And he is a player that is kind of similarly built to Anthony Bradford. He's more of a ground, just a massive mauler at the point of attack. I mean, he is listed at 6'5", 340 pounds. So again, more of that mauling type. And so I do have some reservations about how well that either he or Anthony Bradford are going to be able to fit into this wide zone blocking system. I do believe that both of them, especially Bradford, can be successful in the NFL, but their fit in this particular scheme, it feels like a little bit of a stretch. And so, again, I believe in the young talent there. At the same time, I also believe that there are a number of prospects in this year's draft class that should be able to fit in better, and also be on the rookie contracts that both of those 2 players are still on. And that to me is one of the keys, and that why I never expected the Seattle to really go all into this free agent class in terms of interior offensive linemen. I mean, that would make sense if you're looking at this from like a fantasy football perspective, but true roster building in the NFL is that you are not going to give up rookie contracts very often, not if you believe in the talent at all. And I do believe that the Seattle believes in the young talent that they drafted. In the case of the 3 players that we just mentioned, and the Oregon player was brought in, as you mentioned, from the Baltimore Ravens, obviously somewhere that Mike McDonald has a great deal of familiarity with. So I do think that this is a group that even if Seattle didn't draft a single interior offensive lineman from this draft class, I think the Seahawks feel better about their positional group here than a lot of people think. At the same time, I do expect them to venture into the guard land just because this is a quality class. This is one that I think that Seattle needs to show their fan base, frankly, that they are committed to improving the play of the interior offensive line.
And one thing I want to mention, and it's going to be clear when we get to our draft profiles coming up, but just because a guy weighs 330, 340 does not mean that eliminates them from being able to run zone concepts. It's just a lot harder to find guys that size that excel in those systems. There are certainly exceptions to the rule around the NFL. The Broncos have had, in the 2000s, most of their guys were smaller, but they had a few big guards that excelled in that scheme. If you have good enough feet, you can play in this scheme. And there are some bigger guys that offer that in this draft class. So I don't want to just sit here and say, well, just because you're 330 pounds doesn't mean you can't play in the system. but it makes it a lot tougher. There's a lot fewer of those massive human beings that have the mobility and the quickness to be able to play in this type of a scheme. When we come back, look, this has been the episode I've been looking forward to. If you don't love offensive line play, then, maybe you're not super excited, but I am, because this is a deep and talented guard class, and everybody knows the Seahawks could use some reinforcements there. We're going to be diving into day one selections and some potential day two gems. That'll be coming up next here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Curation makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. I just checked the Game Time app before the start of the show, and believe it or not, there's still some solid deals coming up for the Final Four in San Antonio. The lowest price guarantee offered by Game Time ensures that if you find a better deal elsewhere, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. They also have seat views that you can check out before you buy. There's no surprise fees. And of course, with the price guarantee, you can book with the lowest or the best total confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s that are listening in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. It's all about the guards today on Locked On Seahawks. And obviously, as we just talked about, Rob, this was a position that fans, pretty much the entire fan base at this point, believes that guard is the biggest weakness. And everybody was hoping for free agent signings to try to boost that group. Will Fries didn't work out. They haven't signed anybody else since. Josh Jones can play guard, but he's better suited to play tackle. He's replacing George Fant as the swing tackle. If there's a silver lining here, though, we've been talking about this the last couple of weeks, 12s. If there's a silver lining for Seahawks fans, this is a really good guard class coming in this 2025 NFL draft. And maybe the most exciting part about it, Rob, is there might be 3 or 4 guards that could go in the first round in this draft, which is unheard of. You very rarely see that many guards get picked that quickly, but there could be 3 or 4 guys off the board by the time that Thursday night wraps up in Green Bay.
Yeah, that's well said. It is unusual to have this many guards being earning these types of grades. However, there are some pretty exceptional athletes among this year's guard class and guys that have the durability that I think are going to allow NFL teams to project them as kind of those plug and play players. Now, that said, the 4 players that we're going to be highlighting here as far as first-round candidates for the Seahawks are as varied as it gets. And so let's just kind of start off with Kelvin Banks and Tyler Booker, the 2 guys coming from, blue blood programs that, there's going to be some positional stretching there if they were going to join the Seahawks. And so with Kelvin Banks, you're talking about a 3-year starter at Texas, but all of them at the left tackle position. He's got 33-inch arms, and so some are trying to move him inside to guard. He's a bit of a grappler, but at the same time, because he has the agility that has allowed him to be as successful as he was at left tackle for Texas, then it should be a relatively easy transition for him. However, again, he's never played left guard. And that is the position I think that the Seahawks are most likely to be looking for some type of help here in this positional group. Tyler Booker, on the other hand, has played the majority of his time at Alabama at left guard position. Started 26 games for the Tide, 25 of those 26 as a left guard, 1 at the left tackle position. But he is physically a different kind of a guy. He is an absolute maul. 6'5", 321 pounds. He feels like more of a schematic fit in a gap system, just because of his size and his physicality. But at the same time, if you are looking for a guy who just looks the part, I mean, my goodness, he is just a strapping guy. He's got 11-inch hands. He's got the biggest hands of any of the interior offensive linemen in this draft class. And that is important when you think about it. You have to be able to hang on to these different players that you are trying to block, whether it be in the defensive line or at the linebacker position. Of course, it seems like every year the Alabama offensive linemen come into the NFL and are very successful. So there is some comfort there. And again, the intangibles that he offers, his leadership skills is being touted by just about everybody. And that is something that at least certainly that I've been talking about, that I want Seattle to have a guy that can be kind of that sheriff in the room, so to speak, along the offensive line. So I think if those are two players to kind of start the conversation with, I wouldn't be surprised at all if both of them are off the board by the time the Seattle is up at number 18 overall, which is why I think the Gray Zabel and Donovan Jackson, two better schematic fits, in my opinion, might actually wind up being better fits for the Seahawks, at least when it comes to mock draft purposes and things of that nature.
And I'm going to push back a little bit, and not necessarily that you were saying this, but I'm going to push back at the idea that Tyler Booker can't play in Clint Kubiak's system. If you watched Alabama play, I know he didn't test well. I wasn't expecting him to be honest with you. I didn't think he was going to go in and post like a 7, 8, or 9 relative athletic score. He posted a 2 something. But when you watch the film, he is more than capable of executing reach blocks. He is sneaky athletic out there in terms of being able to get after guys. And I think his technique allows him to be successful in that regard. He's technically sound. And look, Clint Kubiak's talked about this already. If the personnel that they have is better suited to mix in a little bit more gap, he's not afraid to do that. He's already mentioned that if Tyler Booker's that best player there and he can come in and start for you day one, which I think he absolutely would, I think you've got to go that route because I don't think that he is going to be a scheme misfit. As far as Banks goes, watching his tape, to me, the best part of his game is his zone blocking in the run game. To me, that is the biggest strength for him. Now, playing guard is going to be different than tackle, but at the same time, he's going to have a lot of the same type of assignments, which I think he's going to be able to handle. It's all going to boil down to, can you block defensive tackles like you can block edge guys or 3-techs? Because that's who he's going to be going up against. I'm very excited about Gray Zabel, though. And it's not just because he's got I think his name is awesome for an offensive lineman. Gray Zabel. It just sounds like a tough dude. And he's from North Dakota State. They kick out really good offensive linemen there in Fargo. He goes to the Senior Bowl, maybe the most impressive player in Mobile that week, just bullying Power 4 conference guys all week long. Goes to the combine, even though he only did a couple of the exercises. Everything he did, he tested really well at. You could see the movement skills on the drill work on the field at Lucas Oil Stadium. The guy's played guard. He played tackle. He's played everywhere except center at the college level, which just seems like a North Dakota State thing. You got to be able to play everywhere to play for us. And versatility is valued. I just love the athleticism combined with the power. You can see the way that he drives guys off the ball. I think he's somebody that has some scheme flexibility. And again, we talked about this a few weeks ago. I just feel like the gap's closing here. The really good FCS players, we're seeing more and more of them every year that are coming in and playing at a high level in the NFL as rookies. I think Gray Zabel can be that next one. And Donovan Jackson, we've talked about him a bunch already, but the fact that he played left tackle last year, which he had not played before, filled in for Josh Simmons, who gets hurt. First game against Penn State, gives up a couple sacks, looks terrible, gave up 3 pressures the rest of the season. He was absolutely fantastic. I don't think he's a tackle in the NFL, but you saw the athleticism out there. You keep him at the guard spot, and he is the perfect athlete for Clint Kubiak's scheme.
Yeah, and I think that's well said when it comes especially to Donovan Jackson here and just the positional versatility that he demonstrated, his fit in this offense. I do think that there is an argument to be made that Donovan Jackson may wind up checking more boxes than anybody else in this interior offensive line class for the Seahawks specifically. Look, Gray Zabel, in terms of his athletic ability, as you mentioned, his just his dominant performance at the Senior Bowl, at the Combine as well. I mean, terrific showing there. His the 26 repetitions in the bench press demonstrates his strength. The 36.5-inch vertical jump for Gray Zabel is just remarkable number for an offensive lineman at 312 pounds. And my goodness, that's better than most of the wide receivers in this draft class. So again, absolutely phenomenal athletes. And then as you acknowledged, he played all over the field for North Dakota State, goes to the Senior Bowl, and he did take some snaps at the center position. So he basically has played everywhere, and everywhere that he has played, he's done very well. There are times when you watch him on tape and his initial quickness off the ball, it leaves you kind of like frothing and drooling, basically. And when it comes to
it's fun to watch.
Yeah, he is just so quick to the second level. He beats linebackers to the punch. But there are a couple of weaknesses here. I've heard so many people just gush about Gray Zabel that I do want to make sure that we talk about two things that are a little bit concerning for him. For one, as I mentioned, he is so quick to the second level that sometimes he gets there and then doesn't know where the defender is at this point. And I think that is something that's going to be coachable. But at the same time, when you have been playing so many different positions and you're looking for a guy to be able to plug and play immediately, there's going to be a learning curve here. The other thing about Gray Zabel is he's got a relatively slight shoulders. He has the smallest wingspan of any of this year's interior offensive line class. And like I talked about before, it's 77 and a quarter inches for those of you who are keeping track of these things. But NFL scouts absolutely are. And if you're worried about blockers, the NFL level, being able to kind of just bulldoze a guy into the backfield, that is one of the things that Gray Zabel has been able to demonstrate that he can handle, but it is more of a projection than, again, some of these guys who are a little bit broader in their shoulders. And so those are some legitimate concerns with Gray Zabel's acclimation to the NFL. Now, really quickly with Donovan Jackson, again, this is a guy that started the last 3 years in a row for the Ohio State Buckeyes, was a left guard for the last 2.5 seasons. And then after game 5 against Oregon Ducks, their stud offensive tackle, Josh Simmons, goes down and he slides over and plays that left tackle position. And as you mentioned, he got better and better and better as the year went on. That's something that John Schneider has always prioritized, playing for a blue blood program, being highly durable, having positional versatility. I really think, again, Donovan Jackson would be panned by some if Seattle stayed and selected him at number 18 overall. I think that he might be the cleanest fit of this entire group when it's all said and done for the Seahawks specifically.
The best thing about this, though, is if Seattle does not take a guard in the first round, if all 4 of those players we just talked about are off the board, there's still some guys on day 2 in the second round that are very close in comparison. And the guy, you and I actually might debate this a little bit here briefly, but I've got Tate Ratledge ahead of Donovan Jackson. I like both guys. I think they're both players that could potentially get in the first round. Ratledge is a guy that when you turn on the tape, he is such a physically imposing player in terms of the way that he plays the game. He just knocks dudes off the ball. He's a great drive blocker. You can tell that there's a bit of orneriness to his game, but he is a phenomenal athlete too. And we got to see it at a combine. You can see it in glimpses on tape. He wasn't quite as sharp last year because he was coming off the ankle surgery in midseason. But by the time he got to the playoff, he was playing like he's capable of. You turn on his film in 2023, that dude looked like a potential first-round pick that year with the way that he was knocking guys off the ball, his movement skills, getting to the second level. And he's got wide shoulders. This is a guy that can carry the load. And he just looks like he would be a rugged offensive lineman with the mullet and the mustache. I'm just a big fan of Tate Ratledge, the player, not the hairdo, but that's just to add on here. I'm just really excited about his upside, and I think he'd be a very good fit in this scheme with Clint Kubiak. And one other player I want to mention from day 2 that I have some excitement about here. I'm going to butcher some things with names on some of these players, but I don't have to worry about that with Wyatt Milum from West Virginia, who is not the athlete that some of these players we've talked about are. He did not test near as well as, say, a Tate Ratledge or a Donovan Jackson. But when you turn on the tape, he is a smooth operator in the zone blocking game. He looks like a smooth athlete. He's light on his feet. He gets to his position on reach blocks. He gets the second level. He's really good at getting his hands on guys and keeping them on guys. He's been a really good pass protector. And I believe he started all 4 years he was at West Virginia. I mean, the guy has been playing all 4 years, a ton of snaps. He's been very durable. I am a big fan of Wyatt Milum. He's not getting talked about a lot, but I think he's a guy that, forget about the combine testing, just turn on the tape. That guy is a football player, and he's a really good fit for a zone blocking scheme.
He is. He would take, again, some projection because, as you said, he was a 4-year starter. That's correct. However, all 43 of his starts were at the tackle position. And that, again, I am not nearly as afraid of that with Seattle's offensive line coaching staff that they have at this point, with John Benton and Rick Dennison. And again, as we talked about so many times in the past, that their experience, and go back to what they did with the New Orleans Saints, they often took tackles and moved into guard, or guards and moved into center, or vice versa. Your point is well made, though. Wyatt Milum is a guy that has just the initial agility and balance that is pretty rare for a guy who's 6'7", 313 pounds. And again, it's that 6'7" frame that is what worries me a little bit about moving him inside to guard. A lot of those really tall tackles with short arms. He's got 32 1/8 arms, basically the exact same kind of a thing as Tate Ratledge at 6'7", 308 pounds with 32 1/4 arms. Sometimes those guys are just so top heavy. And that is my biggest concern with both of these two players. With Tate Ratledge, all of his starts were at the right guard position. And, when you're going to gush about a player, just consider this. For a team that went to back-to-back national championship games, the Georgia Bulldogs, this kid came in and started as a redshirt freshman. I mean, when you consider all the talent they have at Georgia, that says a lot right there. But again, I do feel like these are two players that are at 6'7". I just have some reservations about how well they fit in at guard in the NFL, even though, especially in the case of Milum, Ratledge ran like a 4.97 at the combine, but I don't see that type of agility on tape. And so who knows? I mean, that might mean that the Seahawks, of course, are going to take him at number 18 overall. But there's a lot of things about him that I like. But to me, if you're going to go with a guy like that, then I think that you should be waiting for day two. And frankly, I'm just as intrigued by a guy like a Jonah Sabanania, and I probably just butchered his name, from Arizona. Big Jonah, 6'4", 324 pounds, also ran a 4.95, and he does have a little bit of experience at the guard position. And then Marcus Bow, M-B-O-W, but it's pronounced Bow for those of you who are watching and have been watching tape on some of these guys. He's an interesting one because he has some experience at the guard position as well. He played the last 2 seasons at the right tackle position for Purdue, but you watch him at guard, and again, he has the initial quickness and the radar, the second level that some of the other blockers we talked about lack a little bit. Bo has that ability, again, coming from Purdue. I think that he would be a quality fit on day two if the Seahawks were unable to select a top interior offensive lineman in the first round.
When we come back, there's still plenty of talent at the guard spot on day 3. We're going to be diving into prospects to watch in the final 4 rounds on Saturday. We're going to get that coming up next here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Welcome back to Locked On Seahawks Wednesday edition. This is your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Let's get to our day 3 guards. And again, we talked about this early on. Good thing for the Seahawks, who have needs at this position. There is a lot of depth, and it goes into day 3. At least the number of guys that we expect are probably going to be available on day 3. And a couple of these players that we're going to be talking about come from Power 4 schools, so they played top competition. But I know, in your opinion, there is a local product that warrants a lot of looking by the Seahawks if they're trying to get a guard on day 3.
Yeah, Joshua Gray from Oregon State is a player I'm really, really high on, Corbin. Again, some of the things that I think are absolutely check the box for the Seahawks is positional versatility and his durability. And Joshua Gray, starred at the left tackle position for basically the last 4 years. And then this past season moved inside to left guard, started all 12 games for them, was a team captain. He started 56 games over the last 5 years. That set a school record, came in at 6'4", 300 pounds. And he is a spectacular athlete. 5.02 seconds in the 40-yard dash for a guy that has kind of his broad broad-shouldered, kind of blocky, square frame. I watched him take snap or deliver snaps, at both the East-West Shrine Bowl as well as his pro day. And again, it's that type of positional versatility, durability, and experience going up against top competition that I think makes Joshua Gray, I think one of the more underrated players, really, regardless of any position in this entire draft class. I would not be surprised at all if he sneaks into the late portion of day 2, early day 3. I think that he could be an absolute steal.
Two players that I'm excited about on day 3, in part because of positional versatility. Clay Webb, coming from Jacksonville State, former 5-star recruit for Georgia. He was a center in high school. And I think there are some teams that are going to be looking at him to move back to center. But I think he can absolutely play the guard position in a scheme such as Seattle's. He's not a drive blocker. That is not the strength of his game, but he's very nimble. He's always been a great athlete. He was one of the reasons he was a 5-star recruit is this guy's always had the athleticism checked off. I think he would be a good fit in this scheme, and maybe Seattle could draft him on day 3 and figure out, well, maybe he can be a center for us. Maybe he can be a guard. It's nice to have players like that, to have that type of versatility. And Jackson Slater, coming from the Seattle area, this is a kid that knows the region, obviously, played at Sacramento State, All-American player at the FCS level. Not quite as athletic, but he still moves pretty well, and he has played guard his entire college career. There's been a lot of talk about teams being very interested in him as a center, though. So it's similar to Clay Webb, another guy that the athleticism is there for him to play in this zone scheme. Coming back home, obviously, would have some cherry on top appeal, but both these guys, to me, are 4th or 5th round caliber players that have starting upside if they are with the right coaching staff and in the right scheme. To me, the Seahawks have both those checked off for two particular players.
Yeah, and I'll throw one other player out there that I really like as far as a day 3 fit from scheme. And again, the durability and the positional versatility aspect that we talked about before. That would be Caleb Rogers from Texas Tech. He's 6'5", 312 pounds, got 32 3/8 inches on arms, The one thing that worries me a little bit is I talked about this before with Tate, Ratledge, and just, and as well as Tyler Booker, these meat cleavers that they have as hands. Caleb Rogers' hands, 9 3/4 inches, are pretty small for what comes to an interior offensive lineman. That said, this is a 55-game starter. He had 15 starts at left tackle, 2 at left guard, 36 at right tackle, 1 at right guard. So, again, he can play all up and down the line of scrimmage. To me, he flashed a little bit at the Senior Bowl. There definitely were some misses, but there were also some plays where he got to the second level and he was looking to pancake guys. So he plays a little bit of that orneriness that we talked about, some of those offensive linemen that might be off the board in the 1st or 2nd round. The Seahawks might be able to kind of come back in mid to late day 3 with Caleb Rogers and still be able to get a guy who checks off a lot of those boxes.
Let's talk sleepers real quick. And anytime you have the depth that you have at a position like this spot, there's going to be a few guys on here that might be household names, but they're going to be sleepers in this particular instance because they're probably day 3, and there's certainly some flaws in their game, but there's some things to be excited about. For me, 2 guys that jump out: Luke Kandra from Cincinnati and Willie Lampkin from North Carolina. Kandra is a much bigger body, but he is nimble enough. He's played in a scheme where he's been asked to zone block frequently at Cincinnati. He's been durable. He can pass protect at a high level. He's played a lot of games. He started a lot of games at the college level, playing for 2 different programs. I don't think that he's quite the same caliber athlete as a number of the guys we've talked about here. And I feel like he's more of a high floor, lower ceiling prospect, which is why he's day 3. But he could be a day 3 guy that can come in and push for playing time early because of the experience and the technical prowess that he has. And Willie Lampkin, look, he's 5'10", 275 pounds. That sounds like a high school offensive lineman, size-wise. But you turn on the tape in the ACC, and this dude just bullied people. And he's obviously an athlete. He can move. He can get to the second level. And the fact of the matter is, at 5'10", he's got the leverage battle against everybody that he goes against. And he plays low to begin with. He's very strong, athletic. I've talked about putting him at H-back or fullback because he's got that kind of athleticism. You could draft him as that and make him a guard down the line. I'm at this point a believer that he can play guard in the NFL, at least in the right scheme. He's got the nastiness and he's strong. He can punch up with 300-plus pounders. He did it in the ACC. I'm very intrigued by him as a late day 3 flyer for a couple of different positions.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on Lampkin. I really think that this is the system in which he could be successful. And the Seahawks have been willing to go with some, undersized guys in the past. Of course, they brought in Nick Harris, who had previously played in the NFL with the Cleveland Browns. I believe he's back with the Cleveland Browns now. And, obviously but for a lot of our listeners, and thank you so much to all of you, always. But for a lot of our listeners that are familiar with the University of Washington program, that's where Nick Harris was an all-conference player. I go back to Joey Hunt at the center position, also a guy that had a kind of a short, squatty frame. So John Schneider has been willing to go with guys who have this, that maybe lack the height that most teams would prefer to have. And Lampkin's lateral agility, his power, it does project nicely to the NFL as a possible tight end or as a fullback. And we know that Clint Kubiak has talked about the need for that as well. So again, we're talking about positional versatility. That's one of the things that Lampkin can check that box, just because of the fact that he not only can play as a 6th offensive lineman. Again, something else that the Seahawks have shown a willingness to play with at times, but also be able to kind of catch some passes out of the backfield, and then still be able to be somebody who feels comfortable at the line of scrimmage.
As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to follow Rob at Rob Rang. You can subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. One other thing, for those of you that are draft experts or you crave the draft, I just unleashed my annual top 100 big board on EmeraldCitySpectrum.com. Make sure to check that out. Just $6 a month. You can subscribe, and we've got coverage of all your favorite Seattle pro and college teams. We'll be coming back tomorrow for our Thursday show and going to be taking a look at some surprise candidates for the first round at pick number 18. Maybe picks that would surprise fans but wouldn't surprise us. We'll be diving into that. Make sure that you listen in and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Go Hawks.